The words hit me like a brick to the face. Michael, we're making some changes to the team structure. Rena's voice was cold, professional, like she was reading from a script. The entire staff meeting had gone quiet. 23 people were staring at me while I sat there, a coffee cup halfway to my lips, trying to process what was happening. Brandon will be taking over your position as lead consultant, effective immediately. She gestured to the kid sitting next to her. 24 years old, fresh MBA, and her sister's son. I'd met him twice before. Once at the company picnic where he complained about the free food. Once in the elevator where he didn't know my name. My stomach dropped. 5 years with this company. 5 years of 60-hour weeks. Missed dinners, canceled vacations. 5 years of building relationships with clients who trusted me specifically. And now this. It's temporary, Rena continued, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. We think Brandon's fresh perspective will bring new energy to the role. Fresh perspective. That's what they always said when they wanted to replace experience with connections. I looked around the room. My team members were staring at their laptops, their phones, anywhere but at me. They knew this was wrong. Everyone knew. The meeting ended with polite applause for Brandon. Nobody looked at me as I gathered my things. After the room cleared, Rena leaned in close. Don't take it personally, Michael. He's family. Packing up 5 years of your professional life shouldn't take 20 minutes, but that's all they gave me. Security stood by while I emptied my desk drawers. Personal photos, my good stapler, the coffee mug my daughter made in art class. Everything else belonged to the company, apparently. My team watched from their cubicles. Sarah from accounting mouthed, "I'm sorry," when security wasn't looking. Roy from IT shook his head in disgust. But nobody spoke up. Nobody said this was wrong. They couldn't afford to. Brandon was already sitting in my chair, feet up on my desk, scrolling through my computer like he owned it. He'd moved in that morning, before the meeting even happened. They'd planned this for weeks, maybe months. I was the last to know about my own firing. "Hey, where do you keep the client contact list?" Brandon called out as I walked past. Like we were buddies. Like this was normal. I didn't answer. My hands were shaking too much to trust my voice. Near the elevator, I noticed something on the reception desk. A manila folder with confidential stamped across it in red letters. Brandon's name was scribbled on a sticky note attached to the front. He'd clearly dropped it during his move into my office. The elevator doors opened. I grabbed the folder without thinking. I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands trembling as I opened the folder. Inside was everything I'd been working on for the past 6 months. The proposal for the Riverside County infrastructure contract. $3.4 million. The biggest deal our firm had ever pursued. My proposal, my research, my client relationships, my strategy, all of it now stamped with Brandon's name. But as I read through the documents, my shock turned to something else. Relief, maybe, because Brandon had already started making changes to my work. And every single change was wrong. He'd misunderstood the client's main concerns. He'd inflated our capabilities in areas we couldn't deliver. He'd cut the timeline in half without understanding why I'd built in safety margins. Most importantly, he'd removed the environmental impact section completely. For a county that had made environmental protection their top priority. This wasn't just incompetence. This was sabotage. Self-sabotage, but still sabotage. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Weston Williams, managing partner at Sterling Consulting Group. We'd competed against each other for years, but always with respect. He answered on the second ring. "Michael, this is unexpected." "Weston," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Remember that offer you made last year? Still got a spot open for a strategic consultant." Sterling Consulting occupied the top 3 floors of the Meridian building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and a coffee machine that actually worked. My new office overlooked the harbor. More importantly, it overlooked the building where Rena was probably realizing she'd made a massive mistake. Weston walked me through the current projects on my first day. "We're pursuing the same Riverside County contract your old firm is chasing," he said with a slight smile. "It should be interesting. You know about that? Michael, you spent 6 months building relationships with that client. Half the county planning committee specifically requested you be involved in any proposal process. When word got out that Rena fired you, they called us directly. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. They called you. They wanted to know if we'd be interested in submitting a bid. with you leading the proposal. Weston handed me a coffee. Think you can help us win this one? I thought about Brandon sitting in my old office, probably still trying to figure out how to use the conference room projector. I thought about Rena's confident smile when she'd humiliated me in front of the entire staff. I think I can guarantee it. Word travels fast in our industry. By the end of my first week at Sterling, I'd already heard 3 stories about Brandon's performance. None of them were good. He'd shown up 45 minutes late to a client meeting, then spent 20 minutes trying to connect his laptop to the projector. He'd confused 2 different projects during a conference call, promising deliverables for the wrong client. Worst of all, he'd accidentally forwarded confidential financial information to a competitor's email address. It's getting ugly over there. Sarah texted me from her personal phone. Roy says Brandon asked him to recover deleted files from your old computer. He wanted your password notes. I wasn't surprised. Brandon was drowning, and Rena was starting to panic. The breaking point came during a presentation to Hartwell Industries, one of our biggest clients. Brandon had prepared slides using my old template, but filled them with information from a completely different project. When the client asked questions, he couldn't answer any of them. They want you back, Sarah's text continued. Mr. Hartwell called Rena personally. Said he'd take his business elsewhere unless you returned to handle his account. I stared at the message for a long time. 6 months ago, I would have been flattered. 6 months ago, I would have considered it vindication. Now it just felt like confirmation that I'd made the right choice leaving. The Riverside County preliminary briefing was held in the courthouse conference room. I'd been in this room a dozen times over the past year, building relationships, understanding their needs, earning their trust. Walking back and felt like coming home. Until I saw Rena's face. She was sitting at the far end of the table with 2 junior associates I didn't recognize. When I walked in with the Sterling team, her coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Her face went completely white. Mr. Cole, the county liaison, Janet Palmer, stood up to greet me. We've heard great things about your move to Sterling. We're excited to see what you've prepared. I shook her hand, very aware that Rena was watching every interaction. Thank you, Ms. Palmer. I'm looking forward to showing you what we can do. The briefing covered the basic requirements, timeline, and evaluation criteria. Nothing I hadn't heard before. But I noticed something interesting. Every time Ms. Palmer explained a particular requirement, she looked directly at me. Not at Weston, not at the room in general. At me. They weren't just evaluating proposals. They were evaluating which team could actually deliver what they needed. And after 6 months of working with me directly, they knew exactly who that was. The meeting was scheduled to end at 4. At 3:55, Brandon finally showed up. Brandon burst through the conference room doors like he was arriving at a party, not a professional briefing. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie crooked, and he was carrying my old proposal folder. The same one he'd left on the reception desk. Sorry I'm late, he announced to the room. Traffic was crazy. It was 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. There was no traffic. He sat down next to Rena and immediately started flipping through the folder, trying to look like he knew what he was doing. I could see him scanning the pages, probably seeing the information for the first time. Mister? Ms. Palmer looked at him expectantly. Brandon Clark. I'm leading the proposal for our firm. He stood up and extended his hand with the kind of forced confidence that screamed insecurity. I see. And you're familiar with the project requirements? Absolutely. I wrote the preliminary assessment myself. He gestured to the folder. I almost laughed. Those were my notes, in my handwriting, with my signature at the bottom. Ms. Palmer exchanged a glance with her colleague. Excellent. Could you summarize your understanding of our primary environmental concerns? Brandon's confident smile faltered. He flipped through the folder frantically. Environmental concerns? Yes, of course. We've identified several key environmental areas of focus. The silence in the room was deafening. Ms. Palmer waited patiently while Brandon continued searching through papers he clearly hadn't read. Finally, she turned to him with a polite but pointed question. Mr. Clark, did you write this proposal deck yourself? That evening, Weston and I were working late when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. New phone. Can't talk at the office. Call me. I stepped outside and dialed the number. Sarah answered immediately. Michael, thank God. I can't stay on long, but you need to know what's happening here. What's going on? It's bad. Really bad. Brandon's been lying about everything. The client metrics, the timeline projections, even our staffing capabilities. He's telling Riverside County we have twice as many certified engineers as we actually do. My stomach dropped. Falsifying capabilities in a government proposal wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. How do you know this? He's been asking me to adjust the numbers in our capability reports. Make us look more impressive. I've been stalling, but Rena's pressuring me to just do whatever Brandon wants. I thought about the eager kid who'd taken my job, now potentially committing fraud to cover up his incompetence. Sarah, you can't be part of this. If they get caught. I know. That's why I'm calling. I've been documenting everything. Emails, requests, the original files before Brandon changed them. I don't know what to do with it all. Through the window, I could see Weston reviewing our proposal. Our honest, accurate, completely legitimate proposal. Sarah, can you send me copies of everything? Tonight. Are you going to turn them in? I looked across the street at Rena's building, dark except for a few windows where desperate people were probably working late to fix Brandon's mistakes. I'm going to let them expose themselves. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. with a dozen attachments. Financial reports with obvious alterations. Capability assessments with inflated numbers. Timeline projections that were impossible to meet. And at the bottom, a video file labeled Staff Meeting Confidential.mp4. I almost deleted it without watching. Then I saw the timestamp, yesterday's date. The video was grainy, clearly recorded on someone's phone from the back of a conference room. But the audio was crystal clear. Brandon's voice, loud and confident, addressing what looked like the entire proposal team. Look, these government people don't know what they're talking about half the time, he said, leaning back in his chair. They're bureaucrats, not business people. We just need to tell them what they want to hear, get the contract signed, and figure out the details later. Someone off camera asked about the environmental requirements. Environmental stuff is just box checking, Brandon laughed. Nobody actually cares about that. It's all politics. We say we'll do it. They pretend to believe us. Everyone's happy. The camera panned slightly, showing Rena nodding along. No objection. No correction. Full approval. But the worst part came at the end, when someone mentioned my name. Michael who? Brandon said with a smirk. Oh, the old guy we replaced? Yeah, he was totally washed up. Couldn't adapt to modern business practices. Sometimes you have to clear out the dead weight, you know? The video ended with uncomfortable laughter from the room. I stared at my computer screen for a long time. Then I opened a new email, attached the video file, and sent it to an anonymous tip account I found on the Riverside County website. No explanation. No context. Just the video. Let them draw their own conclusions. The call came at 7:30 a.m. Weston burst into my office looking like he'd seen a ghost. Michael, you need to see this. He handed me his phone, open to a local news website. The headline read, County opens investigation into consulting firm's proposal practices. The article was brief but devastating. An anonymous tip had led to questions about the accuracy of certain proposal submissions. Riverside County was conducting a preliminary audit of all bidding firms to ensure compliance with federal contracting regulations. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, colleagues, former clients. Word was spreading fast through the consulting community. How do you think they found out? Weston asked, though his expression suggested he had some idea. Sometimes the truth has a way of surfacing, I said carefully. An hour later, Sarah texted me from yet another new number. All hell breaking loose here. The audit team showed up at 8 a.m. Brandon locked in a conference room with lawyers. Rena screams at everyone. By lunch, 3 more news outlets had picked up the story. By evening, it was trending on LinkedIn. I watched from my office window as reporters gathered outside Rena's building. Brandon's company car was still in the parking garage. He probably couldn't leave without facing cameras. My phone buzzed with one more text from Sarah. Rena just stormed into Brandon's office. I heard her yell, "What the hell did you say on camera?" Sasha Chun had been my closest colleague at the old firm. We'd worked together for 3 years, shared the load during busy seasons, covered for each other during family emergencies. If anyone understood how wrong my firing had been, it was her. Her message came through LinkedIn. Can we meet? There are things you need to know. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from either of our offices. Sasha looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. This whole thing is falling apart, she said without preamble. The audit, the investigation, Brandon's incompetence. But it's worse than you know. She handed me a USB drive. Emails, financial documents, recorded conversations. Everything I could gather before they start deleting files. Sasha, you could get in trouble for this. I'm already in trouble. We all are. When this blows up, everyone who stays quiet is going to be implicated. She stirred her coffee nervously. There's something else. Brandon didn't just lie about capabilities. He's been skimming money from the project budgets. My blood went cold. Skimming how much? Small amounts from each project. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. But over 6 months, she pulled up a calculator on her phone. Nearly $50,000. I stared at the USB drive. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was criminal fraud. Why are you giving this to me? Sasha met my eyes for the first time since we'd sat down. Because you're the only person I trust to do the right thing with it. And because she pulled out her phone and showed me an email. Look at this. The message was from Rena to Brandon, sent just that morning. We can fix the numbers later. Family takes care of family. Don't worry. The notification came on a Friday afternoon. Sterling Consulting and 2 other firms had been selected as finalists for the Riverside County contract. 3 companies would present their final proposals the following week. The winner would be announced within 48 hours. Notably absent from the finalist list, Rena's firm. They've been disqualified pending the audit results, Weston explained during our team meeting. Apparently, some serious discrepancies were found in their initial submission. Our competition was now down to Sterling and Pinnacle Associates, a larger firm from Seattle. On paper, they had more resources and a longer track record with government contracts. In reality, we had something more valuable. We had me. Michael, we want you to lead the final presentation, Weston said. This is your project. You've earned this moment. I thought about all the late nights I'd spent preparing the original proposal. All the client meetings, the relationship building, the careful planning that Brandon had dismissed as old-fashioned thinking. Now it was going to determine who won the biggest contract in our firm's history. I'll need 3 days to prepare, I said. You've got them. That evening, I worked late putting together a presentation that would showcase not just our capabilities, but our understanding of what Riverside County actually needed. Real solutions to real problems, not just promises and platitudes. My computer chimed with an email notification. The sender was concern.colleague@tempmail.com. The message was brief. Be careful at the presentation. They're planning something. Check the backup systems. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then forwarded the message to our IT department with a note. Can we do a security sweep before the big presentation? Monday morning, presentation day. I arrived at the office early to run through my slides one final time. Everything was perfect. 6 months of work distilled into 45 minutes of clear, compelling arguments for why Sterling should win this contract. I inserted my backup USB drive to double-check the files. That's when I noticed something wrong. The presentation was corrupted. Half the slides were missing. The other half were scrambled with random text and broken images. What the hell? I clicked through frantically, trying to understand what had happened. Weston appeared in my doorway. Michael, we need to leave in 20 minutes. How's everything looking? There's a problem. I showed him the corrupted files. Someone sabotaged the presentation. We called IT immediately. Looks like a targeted malware attack, the technician explained. Someone with physical access to the system planted something that would activate this morning. Very sophisticated. My mind raced. Who had access to our systems? Who would know the exact timing of our presentation? Then I remembered the anonymous email from Friday. Check the backup systems, it said. I opened my personal laptop and smiled. I'd been in this business too long to rely on just one copy of anything. Cloud storage, personal drives, even a printed backup in my desk drawer. Whoever had sabotaged our main presentation had underestimated exactly how paranoid 5 years of working for Rena had made me. Weston, I said, ejecting my personal backup drive. You taught me to always plan for betrayal. The presentation room was packed. County officials, planning committee members, environmental consultants, and financial advisors. 43 people who would decide the fate of a $3.4 million contract. I connected my laptop to the projector, hyper-aware that somewhere in the room, someone was probably expecting to watch me fail spectacularly. Instead, my slides appeared perfectly on the screen. Good morning. I began, making eye contact with Janet Palmer in the front row. 6 months ago, I began working on this project with one goal: to understand not just what Riverside County was asking for, but what you actually needed. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through every aspect of our proposal. Environmental impact assessments based on real data, not assumptions. Timeline projections that accounted for seasonal variations and permit processing delays. Staffing plans that matched our actual capabilities, not inflated numbers designed to impress. Most importantly, I addressed the elephant in the room. I know there have been questions about proposal accuracy and bidder qualifications in this process, I said carefully. I want to be absolutely clear. Every number in our proposal is real. Every timeline is achievable. Every promise is one we can keep. The room was silent. I could feel the weight of their attention, their evaluation, their trust. When I finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. But it was Janet Palmer's question that mattered most. Mr. Cole, I have to ask. You've clearly developed a deep understanding of this project over many months. Why did your previous company let you go again? I looked directly at her, then at the rest of the room. Sometimes, experience is valued less than connections. But I believe competence should matter more than convenience. The news broke that evening. Local consulting firm under federal investigation for contract fraud. The story had everything. Falsified documents, misrepresented capabilities, financial irregularities, and video evidence of executives mocking government officials. Social media exploded with outrage. Local business leaders distanced themselves. Clients began canceling contracts. By morning, Rena's firm had lost 4 major accounts. Their stock price had dropped 30%. The FBI had seized financial records as part of a criminal investigation. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang. Rena's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. The message was exactly what I expected: desperate, angry, and completely lacking in self-awareness. Michael, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. There are things you don't understand, context you're missing. I think we can work together to resolve this misunderstanding. Call me back immediately. I deleted the message without finishing it. An hour later, she called again. This time I answered. Michael, thank God. Listen, I know we've had our differences, but we're family here. We've worked together for 5 years. Surely we can. I hung up without saying a word. The board meeting was called for an emergency session. I didn't need to be there to know what was happening. The local business journal live tweeted the entire proceedings. Board votes to remove CEO pending investigation. Interim leadership appointed following fraud allegations. Multiple executives terminated effective immediately. Brandon was fired before lunch. Rena was gone by dinner. The next morning brought another headline. Major consulting firm files for bankruptcy protection. But the best news came in a formal letter delivered to Sterling's offices. Congratulations on your selection for the Riverside County Infrastructure Development contract. We'd won. Not just the contract, but vindication. Weston knocked on my office door holding a bottle of champagne. I think we need to celebrate. Not yet, I said, looking out my window at the building where I'd spent 5 years of my career. This isn't over. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations. You deserve this. Sarah, now it is over. The phone calls continued for weeks. Former colleagues looking for jobs. Clients wanting to transfer their business. Reporters seeking comments about the investigation. I ignored most of them. But when my mother called, I picked up immediately. I saw the news about your old company, she said. Are you all right? I'm better than all right, Mom. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I always knew they'd regret losing you, she said. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the harbor. 6 months ago, I'd been humiliated in front of my colleagues, dismissed like I was worthless. Now I was leading a multi-million-dollar project for a firm that valued experience over connections. My computer chimed with an email notification. A recruiting firm in Chicago wanted to discuss an exciting executive opportunity leading their West Coast expansion. For the first time in months, I was in demand again. Not because of who I knew, but because of what I could do. I forwarded the email to Weston with a note. Want a counteroffer? Rena's LinkedIn post appeared on a Tuesday morning. I wouldn't have seen it, but half my network was sharing it with comments ranging from disbelief to outright mockery. After recent events, I've had time to reflect on the challenges facing modern business leadership. It began. Sometimes, Organizational culture can lead to misunderstandings and miscommunications that don't reflect our true values. It went on for 3 paragraphs, blaming systemic issues and communication breakdowns for everything that had happened. No mention of nepotism, no acknowledgement of fraud, no apology to the clients who'd been deceived or the employees who'd been fired to cover up Brandon's incompetence. The comments section was brutal. "This is what happens when you replace skill with nepotism," wrote one former executive. "Accountability starts at the top," posted another. "Some misunderstandings involve federal fraud charges," added a third. Brandon, meanwhile, had deleted all his social media accounts. His LinkedIn profile was gone. His Twitter account had vanished. Even his Instagram, which had been full of expensive dinners and vacation photos, had disappeared completely. Smart move. The internet never forgets, but sometimes it stops looking. My new office was 3 times the size of my old one, with a view of both the harbor and the building where Rena was probably still trying to salvage her reputation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sterling had promoted me to senior partner in charge of West Coast government contracts. My salary had doubled. My bonus structure was tied to results, not politics. Most importantly, I had the authority to hire my own team. "I want people who've been overlooked," I told Weston during our staffing meeting. "People with talent who've been passed over for the wrong reasons." My first hire was easy. Sasha knocked on my door on a Thursday afternoon, resume in hand. "I heard you might have an opening," she said with a nervous smile. "Sasha, after what you did to help expose the fraud, you can write your own job description. I just want to work for someone who values doing things right. That's exactly why I'm here." By the end of the month, I'd hired 4 former colleagues from Rena's firm, all talented people who'd been sidelined or overlooked. Together, we were building something that valued competence over connections. The industry recognition came faster than I'd expected. Consultant of the Year from the Western Government Contracting Association. Excellence in Public-Private Partnership from the National Infrastructure Foundation. Ethical Leadership Award from the Professional Services Council. The ceremony was held at the Grand Hotel downtown. 500 people in black tie attire celebrating the year's achievements in government consulting. I was seated at the head table, looking out at an audience that included many of the same people who'd watched me get fired 6 months earlier. When my name was called for the Ethics Award, the applause was immediate and sustained. I walked to the podium, looking out at faces I recognized from years of networking events and professional conferences. 6 months ago, I learned an important lesson. I began. Sometimes, being underestimated is your greatest weapon. When people think you're disposable, they stop watching what you're capable of. The room was completely silent. Real success isn't about who you know or who you're related to. It's about what you can deliver when everything is on the line. Thank you for this recognition, but more importantly, thank you for valuing substance over connections. The standing ovation lasted 2 full minutes. The email arrived on a Monday morning, 3 months after the awards ceremony. Subject line, personal message, confidential. "Michael, I hope this finds you well. I've been following your success at Sterling, and I wanted to reach out personally. I know our working relationship ended badly, but I hope we can move past that. I'm exploring new opportunities and would value your professional recommendation." I read Rena's message twice, then forwarded it to my trash folder without responding. An hour later, another email arrived. "I know you're busy, but this situation has been very difficult for me personally. My severance package was denied due to the ongoing investigation. My professional network has disappeared. I'm facing serious financial hardship." I stared at the screen for a long moment. 6 months ago, I would have felt sympathy. 6 months ago, I might have offered to help. Now I just felt the satisfaction of natural consequences playing out exactly as they should. I opened a reply window and began typing. "Rena, I understand you're facing challenges. I'm sure you'll figure something out." Then I deleted everything and closed the email without responding. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. The phone call came from Sterling's HR director on a Friday afternoon. "Michael, we've got an interesting situation. A Brandon Clark just applied for our junior consultant position. His resume says he has experience with government contracting." I almost laughed. What kind of experience? According to his application, he led a major infrastructure proposal for Riverside County. Says he was personally responsible for the client relationship and strategic planning. And what did you tell him? Nothing yet. I wanted to check with you first, since you have more background in that area. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the harbor where cargo ships moved slowly toward the horizon. I think we'll pass on that particular candidate. Any specific reason? Let's just say we prefer to hire people who earn their positions rather than inherit them. The HR director chuckled. I'll make a note in his file. Something about not being a good cultural fit. An hour later, Sarah texted me. Heard Brandon got rejected from Sterling. Word is he's applied to 6 firms this month. No luck anywhere. I typed back. The professional community is smaller than people think. 1 year later, I was walking downtown after a client dinner when I found myself on the street where I used to work. The building looked different somehow. Smaller, maybe. Less impressive than I remembered. Half the floors were dark. A commercial space available sign hung in the lobby window. According to the real estate listing, the building was 40% vacant since a major tenant had filed for bankruptcy. I stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, remembering the morning I'd been fired. The humiliation, the shock, the desperate feeling that my career was over. Now it seemed like something that had happened to someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Weston. Great job on the Portland presentation today. The client wants to expand the contract by another $2 million. I looked up at the dark windows of my old office, then at the message on my phone. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. Sometimes it was just building a life so successful that your former employers became irrelevant. I walked back to my car without looking back. The final chapter of this story came 18 months after my firing, in the form of a LinkedIn notification. Brandon Clark has applied to connect with you. I clicked on his profile out of curiosity. His employment history was a disaster. 6 different consulting firms in 12 months. Each job lasted only a few weeks before ending due to restructuring or strategic realignment. The corporate euphemisms for this person was completely incompetent. His most recent position had ended 3 months ago. Since then, radio silence. I scrolled through his connections and found something interesting. Several HR directors from firms where I'd been consulting were in his network. A quick message to one of them confirmed what I suspected. Oh, Brandon Clark? Yeah, he interviewed here last month. Seemed qualified on paper, but when we checked references, she paused. Let's just say we went with someone else. I'd never badmouthed Brandon to anyone. I'd never had to. His reputation preceded him now, built on his own incompetence and the criminal investigation that had followed him from his previous job. I declined his connection request without a message. 5 years have passed since that staff meeting changed my life. Sterling Consulting now has offices in 4 cities, and I run the entire Western Division. We've won 12 major government contracts, employed over 60 people, and built a reputation for delivering exactly what we promise. Sometimes I drive past the building where Rena's firm used to operate. It's been converted to condominiums now. Young professionals live in the space where I once spent 60-hour weeks building someone else's dream. I don't think about revenge anymore. I don't check up on Brandon or wonder what happened to Rena. Success is the best vindication, and I've had more success in the past 5 years than in the previous 20. Yesterday, I got a call from a former colleague at another firm. Michael, there's a situation here. Management just fired our best consultant to make room for the CEO's son. Any advice? I smiled, remembering a conversation from years ago. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting fired by people who don't deserve your loyalty. What should he do? Build something better. Build something where competence matters more than connections. Build something they'll never be allowed into again. Because sometimes, the best revenge is just living a life they'll never be allowed into again.